So, all right, welcome everybody to the Gig Harbor Lodging Tax Advisory Committee meeting, Thursday, June 9th. It is 12:02. I will turn it over to Josh for the roll call and we'll move on from there.
Okay. Let's see, roll call. We have James Carver. See, he's here looking for his microphone. Okay. Jenny Wellman.
Here.
Stephanie Lyle.
Here.
Janae Maton.
Here.
Lindsay Stover.
Here.
And Sue Brayton.
Here.
And Mary Damaris is excused unless there's objection from the commission. Seth, I think we're at the approval of minutes.
Oh, yes, sorry. Okay. The motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
All right,
I'll second.
Second. Thank you, Stephanie. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All right. All right, we can open it up if there's any public comment. Josh, do we have anybody else that's on here?
No, well, we got, let's see, Matt's in there and attendees from staff. I don't know if Matt, did you want to make a comment?
Thanks, Josh. No, I'm good.
All right, thanks. We'll move on to staff reports. Laura. Oh, there you are. Okay, I thought we lost them.
Good morning. I'm going to share my screen really quickly just on our updated lodging tax intake. Can I share my screen? Oh, here we go. And as mentioned, I do this every month. So for March 2022, we took in $32,824.17. That is an increase over our average intake of $25,000. So we're pacing at 131%. And that is calculated on the last 5 years of lodging tax in the month of March. Quickly, what we're working on right now. I'm so sorry. Let's see. How do I stop sharing? There we go. What we're working on right now is the final print for the visitor's guide, all of our collateral, which Jenica has designed so well for summer sounds and movies in the park. As you know, movies in the park is shifting to a partnership with Penn Met, so we can focus in on what's driving a little bit more of visitors from 50 miles or greater. And then we are also coming up on, and Josh, you can talk about this a little bit more on our next grant cycle season. So yeah, that's what's happening over here. We are performing incredibly well on our digital ad campaign. We have some great photographers throughout town. And as mentioned before, I'd really love to get new photography for our digital ad campaigns for any of our nonprofits and any of our hotels or short-term rentals that are interested in that. We really need those photos to be able to pitch the amazing experiences we can have in Gig Harbor. So yeah, we're just building out a little bit more of the Visit Gig Harbor website content too, and getting great experiences and options from people. We're also working on that Visit Gig Harbor event calendar to make that a little bit more robust. So we've been scraping from throughout town, and then also just contacting people with new events or people who are applying for permits in order to put items on that calendar. So, and again, our digital ad campaign directs back to that. And I think that's the Cliff's Notes version of what we're working on right now.
Laura, will you forward me the photographer's information? I can use them as a vendor moving forward for newer homes that I'm onboarding. I've actually had some bandwidth issues with the company that I'm using, so that would actually work out well for me.
Absolutely. I've got 2 options for you, and I'll shoot those over. In addition, if we do have, in order to manage cost and just make sure that we get the most amount of bang for our buck on photography, if we could schedule something on one day for several items throughout town, whether it be some of our restaurants, some of our hotels who want updated photography, some of our nonprofits that want a couple of pictures taken, we can set an itinerary for 8 hours and then maximize our time with that photographer. And that'll be a cost that we have through our budget. So no cost to the participants. So great.
All right, we can move on to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee updates. City Clerk Josh Stecker.
Thank you, Seth. Yeah, so we've got a few changes this month, this go around. Mayor Markley has asked me to step in and start being the primary staff contact for LTAC, and kind of filling in Laura's shoes. Not that Laura's going anywhere, she's still going to be at all of our meetings and updating you. So we're not rid of her completely yet at this point. But I will be the primary contact for LTAC. Anything that's grant related is going to go through the clerk's office. So we'll be doing the applications and getting that out there, collecting the applications as they come in, vetting them, getting them ready for you as the committee to review and make your recommendations on. And then we'll be the coordinating with council how those get approved by resolution. And then we'll be actually shepherding the grant process as well. So we'll write the agreements and follow up with the applicants to make sure they're getting paid and submitting all of their reporting requirements. So that's a little bit of change that's going out of the tourism department and into the city clerk's department. Just the city clerk's department is also going to be taking on support for the Parks Commission, as well as the Arts Commission, which we already do. Just kind of bringing a lot of the city's official meetings in-house in the clerk's department. So it's a new change. We're going to see how that works, and hopefully it's a smooth process for us. Wanted to take a few minutes at this meeting to just kind of go over LTAC's scope and function. We had this last summer with MRSC. We had Eric Wolcom, and I think most of you were on the commission at that time. I know Jenica's new since then, and I think Lindsay was probably appointed after that as well. So if you weren't at that meeting, if you have the time to go back and review that meeting, that's a great introductory to all things LTAC and the process. But just as a quick overview, lodging tax, as you all know, is an additional sales tax that's a special tax on lodging that the city collects. So anybody that provides lodging in the city is required to collect it, and they're required to submit it to the state, and then the state in turn disperses it to us as the city to spend. We know that it can only be spent on certain tourism related things, tourism marketing and operations of special events and festivals designed to attract tourists, operations and capital expenditures for tourism related facilities owned by the city, and operation of tourism related facilities owned and operated by nonprofit organizations. One question that comes up every year, that has come up every year with this group, is, are for-profit organizations eligible for LTAC funding? And that question has been answered in different ways by different organizations. MRSC has advised us that it is allowable, with the caveat that we should check with our own attorney. We've had this conversation with our attorney now, and he advises us that he does not think it's appropriate for us to fund for-profits. So that is going to be our plan going forward. LTAC funding will only be for municipalities and nonprofit organizations. So we're going to make that pretty clear. We're going to get the word out there. I know we had a couple of for-profits apply last year. Hopefully that will help clarify things as we go forward, but that is going to be our official stance until our legal counsel advises us otherwise. So hopefully we won't have to revisit that over and over again as we go forward. Yeah, I think most of you are all pretty familiar with the lodging tax process. Anyone that receives lodging tax funds must submit an application. Those applications are all considered equally by the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee and made recommendations on. That, of course, also includes the city. Anytime the city wants to use lodging tax funds, we have to apply the same as everyone else. So for the last 2-3 years, you've seen the city's application come through as well, alongside all the other nonprofits that we've awarded money to. So that process is not changing. Any funding that goes through LTAC or any lodging tax funding that goes out has to be approved by you as the committee. You make a recommendation on who should receive funding and how much they should receive. And that goes to city council, and city council takes their action on it. They're the final approval authority. So council will say, yes, we agree with your recommendations and we will fund accordingly. Council can also decline to fund any organization that you select. So if you recommend someone for funding, council has the authority to say, no, we're not going to fund that group. Council also has the authority to say, we're going to fund a group that you recommended, but it's going to be in a different amount than you recommended. If council decides to do that, then they have to give you 45 days advance notice so that you can provide comment on it. But it's not something you can overrule. So if you say that we're awarding an organization 5,000 and council says, no, we want it to be 10,000, council will come back to LTAC and say, we're going to award this group 10,000. And then you have the opportunity to say why you think that's a good idea or not a good idea, but you can't compel council to change their mind. So if council wants to do 10,000, they're going to do 10,000. So that's how the amounts are determined. The one thing that council can't do is they can't award money to any group, organization that is not recommended by LTAC. So if someone applies for funds and you say this is not a legitimate organization that we should be funding, council can't then go and say, well, we really want to fund these people out of this fund. That's not something that council can do. So the organization has to be approved by you before council can fund it. So and that really is the scope of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. Your scope is very narrow in our Gig Harbor Municipal Code. There's actually 4 things that the committee is charged with, and 3 of them are actually setting up the tax rate and approving the tax rate, which we've already done, and there's not really anything else to do with that. So really the only official function of LTAC is to make recommendation on the grant applications that come in. So that is kind of the quick nutshell version of what LTAC is. Happy to answer any questions, of course, if there's any confusion or clarification that's needed. But that will lead us into the second part of our discussion, which is general rules for advisory bodies. I'm going to pull that up here real quick so I can screen share it with you. So can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So the city council has its own set of guidelines that it adopts that the city has to adhere to and that council holds themselves to. They updated this in April, and part of their update was to include a section of provisions for advisory committees, advisory boards, including the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. So I'm going to scroll down to that section. Basically, the idea here is just to kind of get a common set of expectations for volunteer committee members, a common set of requirements for how committees function. I don't think there's really anything in here that's going to be too shocking or different from what you guys already do, but I wanted to make sure that you're all aware of it because this is council's official set of expectations that they've adopted. So I'm going to go through this, just kind of give you the overview version of it. If there's anything that you have questions about or doesn't make sense to you, just let me know and I'll stop and we can go over it. But this is Article 5 of the council guidelines. The first section is the purpose and application. It just says that this is going to apply to advisory boards, which means any kind of advisory body, including LTAC. And LTAC is specifically listed as one of those in the second section here. All advisory boards have to be established in the Gig Harbor Municipal Code if they're a standing regular body like LTAC. So LTAC has its own chapter in the municipal code that talks about who can be on it, how it's structured, all of that. So that hasn't changed. The scope of work is defined in the municipal code for each advisory board. And as I just mentioned, LTAC's is fairly narrow. It's basically limiting you to making recommendations on the applications that come through. Residency requirements. So this just says that unless the municipal code specifies otherwise, you need to live in the greater Pierce County area, greater Gig Harbor area in Pierce County. LTAC doesn't have any special requirements, so this would be what applies to that. You needed to have be a resident of the greater Gig Harbor area, basically between the Tacoma Narrows Bridge and the Purdy Bridge. The appointment process, this is not really changing other than I think you all were interviewed by the Board and Commission Candidate Review Committee, which is a really long official name for a council committee that used to exist. The process is still going to be the same. We're still going to have 3 council members interview everyone. It's just going to be an ad hoc committee. So it won't be the same established committee from month to month doing all the interviews. We'll just, as the need comes up, we'll ask council for volunteers and whoever we get will do the interviews. Council used to have 5 standing committees and they decided that they didn't want those anymore. They'd rather do all their discussion as a full council in their study session. So one of the things that got cut was that interview committee. Appointment terms, LTAC's appointment terms are for 3 years. So that applies to all positions. LTAC is a little bit unique too, because state law requires that the city council reviews the entire roster of LTAC annually. So they're just nominally supposed to give a head nod and say, yeah, we've reviewed the LTAC roster and everybody looks good on there. So, but otherwise you'll be appointed for a 3-year term and then you'll reapply if you want to continue on. Vacancies, this is basically just saying that, if you need to step down, it gives us a reappointment process. The one thing that's different in this rule that hasn't really existed before is that if we have an issue with someone where they're in violation of these policies or the municipal code, or there's something seriously wrong, the mayor's been given authority to remove someone from a committee. So it wasn't something previously that council had delegated to the mayor, but it has now. I don't really foresee this is ever going to come up. I hope it never comes up, but just in case we get in a situation where we need to take action like that, the mayor has that authority now. The expectations of board members, this really isn't anything new. I don't think there's anything alarming in here. It just says we expect you to come to the meetings. You're here to serve the interests of the public. We expect you to be communicating and participating in the group discussions. Just basically what you're currently doing now. So there shouldn't be too many issues with this section. Each group will have a chair and a vice chair. LTAC's a little bit different because the chair is appointed by state law as the elected official. So you don't really have the ability to appoint a vice chair. So Seth will be the chair of this group no matter what. And if we have a situation where the chair can't be present at a meeting, then we'll just need to reschedule the meeting. There's a section here on quorums. The question comes up occasionally when we have boards that are missing members that are underfilled. A quorum is always a majority of the number of people appointed, not the number of seats. So LTAC has 9 seats. If we're ever in a position where we're down to like 7 members, then a quorum drops down to 4. So it's just saying we don't have to have 5 of the 7 members in order to conduct business. Conflicts of interest. If any advisory board member has a conflict where there might be an appearance of fairness, then they should recuse themselves from discussion. This one comes up with LTAC fairly frequently, and MRSC has actually given us guidance on this. And I know we've talked about this before, but MRSC is of the opinion that LTAC members are not in a conflict of interest if they're voting on their own application. MRSC has said that it's implied that if you are appointed to LTAC as a recipient, that you are a voting member on your own application. So I know in the past we've asked the people on our group that are applying for applications to recuse themselves from the vote on their application. That's not something that the committee should do. I think as the recipient, you are at liberty to recuse yourself if you feel that that's what you need to do, but the commission itself should not make you do that. So I just want to put that out there before we get to the application process, that it is implied that if you are a recipient, that you should be voting on all things that are brought before the committee. Section 512 talks about liaisons and representatives. So the mayor is designating staff people to function as the official liaison for this group. So that's going to be me for the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. So any kind of procedural questions, anything about, process or how the committee works or lodging tax grants, those can go through me now. I'll be the one that coordinates with other staff if we need to, or if we need to coordinate with the mayor. So this would not apply though to if you have questions about, what Laura's doing for marketing events and, how you can get involved and partnering with the city's marketing stuff. That's all separate from the official LTAC business. So go ahead and keep reaching out to Laura for that stuff. If you're working with her on projects or you want to partner with her, or you're looking for her input on something, go ahead and reach out to Laura on that stuff. Robert's Rules of Order is the official guidance for advisory boards. We don't take that too seriously with advisory boards. We have business to conduct, and if we don't know the proper Robert's Rules of Order procedure to do something, we're not going to let that stand in the way. So we're going to follow. We're going to get to the intent of the committee, and we'll use Robert's Rules if it's convenient. But otherwise, we're going to just make sure that we're getting the work done we need to get done. Advisory boards can set their own regular meetings dates. Subcommittees, advisory boards can have subcommittees, but we need to clear those with the mayor first. Subcommittees, it's not really an LTAC issue, but other committees have issues with creating subcommittees where they can create quite a lot of staff work. So we need to make sure that the mayor is on board with staff allocation for those. Communications with council. Council is asking all of their advisory board members not to communicate with them directly on advisory board business. That should go through your committee and through your liaison. So wouldn't, like in the lodging tax advisory board, it would not be appropriate for you to go to individual council members and get their guidance on what they think you should recommend for grant funding. You shouldn't go to them to lobby for grant funding, or that should stay within your group here in the lodging tax advisory board. And then similarly, council members should not be calling you up and saying, hey, I know there's a grant for this group, I want to see it funded for this much. They're aware of that, and they should not be doing that. Communications with the public. This section is a little poorly worded. Basically what this is trying to say is, don't try to represent yourselves in official capacity to inform the public. It's not really going to be an LTAC issue as much as it is with some of our other groups. But don't go around saying, I'm a lodging tax advisory board member and this is how you need to do this, or this is what you're required to do. If you run into issues like that, just direct them to staff. But I don't see this as being an issue so much with lodging tax. Communications with other advisory board members. For this section, and this you probably had covered in the OPMA training that you had. Be really mindful when you're communicating with each other that you're not communicating in a way that can lead to a serial meeting where you have, one commissioner contacts another one, and then you contact a third person, and then a fourth person gets brought in, and then suddenly we're having a quorum of people in a chain conversation like that. The official business of LTAC, if we're talking about, approving grants and making grant recommendations about, you probably should not be discussing that amongst yourselves outside of the meeting. So if you're going to have conversations about your thoughts and feelings about a group, it's best to have those in the actual meeting so that it's transparent to the public, and people that are watching will know why you're making the decisions you're making. Lobbying efforts. This just means that advisory board members shouldn't go to the state legislature and lobby on behalf of LTAC or the city unless they're specifically directed to do so. I don't think that's going to be an issue for LTAC, but just make sure that you're not representing yourself as speaking on authority of the board. And then the last section is just if there's any kind of expense that comes up related to the group, make sure you get prior approval to us before you're incurring expense that you expect to have reimbursed. So I don't think there was a whole lot that's that different for LTAC, but any questions on any of that? Stephanie?
Yeah, I know you're saying that we only really advise on the applications or the grant applications, but the application process seems like something that we should be able to discuss in this meeting and revise as necessary. Is that correct?
In the meeting?
Yeah, in this format, in this
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because I think that I mean, I like the new application. I think that there could be some minor updates or revisions that could make it a little clearer for applicants and for reviewers. So when the time
Yeah.
comes that we actually want to talk about that, I could add some
Yep.
thoughts there.
And that's what's next on our agenda. And so the application itself, that's an administrative process, and really kind of the policy for that ultimately lies with the mayor because she's the administrative head of the city. So staff develops the application and we set the application process, but we're doing it with the input of LTAC. So the point of this meeting is to get your input and your feedback and make sure that what we're putting out there is going to be what you need to make your decisions when we get the applications in. So yeah. And that's probably a good segue into our next section. Pull up the application here real quick. So yeah, we're getting ready to start the application process. I'm going to pull that up and share it with you. This is a draft that I've been working on with some input from Laura. Very similar to past years. It'll kind of highlight some of the changes that we've gone through. So we have at the top, of course, the lodging tax amount requested. That used to have the limit on there, which was 20,000 per application or 25,000. I can't remember what it was exactly. That's gone now. So we're not putting a cap on what people can ask for anymore. An organization can ask for whatever the amount they feel is appropriate. Determining the amount is going to be up to you as the lodging tax advisory committee and ultimately up to council to determine what the final amount is going to be. So we're not going to put any limitations on the applicants, but we will when we make the approvals and recommendations. The application deadline, I've set that for August 31st of this year, which is a little bit earlier than we've done in the past. I think last year it was September 21st. If we can get applications in by the end of August, we can get them reviewed by LTAC in September and actually have them acknowledged as part of council's budget that they get handed to them on October 1st. That would be ideal for us. I think it would be really beneficial for council to see what they're going to be expected to fund that early in the budget process. Having said that, I don't work with nonprofits a lot, so I don't know if August 31st might be an unrealistic expectation for groups to have their budgets ready for 2023. So that's kind of something I'd like your feedback on. Is that a reasonable expectation, or should we try to push it later into September?
I mean, Lindsay may have some other thoughts on that, but I mean, it's okay for us. But one thought I do have about this is that you might want to put underneath where it says when they're due, say something like for activities within this time frame. So, if it's going to be as of January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023, then we probably should put that date bracket in there so that the applicant understands that they're not applying for funds for anything between September, October, November, or December.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Stephanie on that. There were a couple people who came to me asking questions, knowing that I had applied for LTAC before, and I had to clear that up with them. But yeah, the August 31st deadline, I don't think will be an issue at all.
Okay. All right, so this front page of the application is pretty much the same as we've seen. It just lays out the 4 specific categories that are defined in state law as what we can fund. So tourism marketing, the marketing and operations of special events and festivals, the operation and capital expenditures for the city, and then operation of tourism facilities for nonprofits. And then we have a checklist. These are the 4 things that we need to see in each application. So we need the completed application, which includes the questions that we'll get to. We need a copy of their nonprofit registration because everyone except for the city has to be a nonprofit now. And we need the IRS W-9 form, and then an itemized budget for the event or the operations that they're going to ask for. So those are the 4 things that we need to see in each application.
I think it might not be a terrible idea to come up with a sample budget form. Because a lot of organizations, a lot of people do their budgets in different ways, but because in some cases it can be like, it's really different if you're applying for funding for operations funding as opposed to an event fund. So if you had at least a couple samples of how to build your budget so that we're comparing apples to apples as we review applications, I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, I'll look at some of the past applications that we've got and see which budgets look kind of the
Okay.
clearest. Because the
Yeah.
city, we don't have a standard form that we would use or
Mhm.
something that would look.
Yeah, sometimes
that
it's
would work.
nice to show like what's being funded, in your proposed budget, what's being funded by LTAC, what's
Yeah.
being funded by sponsors, what's being, so that we don't have a matching requirement on this particular grant. So somebody could ask for all the funding for their event from LTAC. But if it's to their advantage to show some form of additional funding, then we should probably be straightforward about that.
Yeah. And I think that's a helpful suggestion because I suspect that some of the applicants we get are kind of creating budgets on the fly for this, specifically for this. So it might be helpful to give them some guidance. All right.
Yeah,
So,
and
go ahead.
Josh, sorry, I'm just gonna shout out here.
Yeah, go ahead.
On the application questions, I think it's also complicated when it says on the second bullet, if a capital expenditure lists the projected impact to tourism, you might want to put in parentheses municipalities only.
Cities only. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so the first section, that would just be a description of the event or facility. I think in the past we've had a little bit of confusion with some events not really having a clear idea of what they were. So I'm hopeful that this section will prompt people to really give us a good description of what it is that they're asking for money for. The second section, I'm going to coordinate with Laura a little bit more on this one. I want to make sure that this matches exactly what we're being asked to report with JLARC. So we had a couple of other extra questions on there that I think were worded a little strangely based on the direction of the past mayor. We talked about whether they were coming from 50 miles away or 2 hours. And the 2 hours thing is, I think it might be interesting to us, but it's not a relevant number for anything that we report. So I think that was kind of muddying the issue. So I want to make sure that these numbers that we're collecting exactly match what we're going to report. So this box may change.
There are also items that we're required to report on that aren't included in this report. So frankly, the number of completed reports we get by the required deadline is minimal. So sometimes it's my guesswork, and much of the time I rely on data from our geofencing service there too when we don't get reports. So that's another item that I'll try to get to you, Josh, is just exactly what those metrics are so we can report.
And we are going to be getting
real
reports from anyone that has a contract going forward. So
yeah,
no one's getting paid until they submit a report anymore.
Could you also, on number 3, could you just put in parentheses like examples of acceptable sources? Because I know that's been a question for a lot of groups. Like, how am I supposed to know this stuff? It's like, I have no idea whether somebody stayed overnight when they came to the museum or not. I don't ask them those questions.
Yeah.
And I don't feel comfortable asking that question.
I think the JLARC website has some examples of ways that they expect people to make that calculation. So I can pull that.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Number 4 is just asking if you've received LTAC funds before.
Josh, for that question, A and B, it says for a different event. I'm wondering for clarity if we put for a different event or operations for a tourism facility, because then it kind of makes it seem like it's only for event.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think we run into that confusion a few times in this application. I've got to iron that out because in some places it just says event, and in some places it references facilities, and it is a bit confusing. So I'm going to work on that language throughout this application.
For the purposes of this application, do we consider tourists and vendors equally? You know, because a lot of vendors, like I'm just thinking of the art festival, for example. A lot of those vendors come from out of town. They're probably staying overnight in some of our local lodging, but I don't know if you count them as tourists or as vendors, or if we're counting them exactly the same.
I would count them in the number of people that are staying overnight because they're coming and putting a head in a bed. So
Yeah.
that's how I'd interpret that. It's bringing someone into the city that would not be here otherwise.
Okay.
Because we're mostly the whole point behind this whole idea is that we're generating sales tax and revenue from people that are coming here that would not normally be here.
Mhm.
Number 5 is describe the prior success of your event. It's fairly straightforward. Number 6 is there a host hotel. Number 7 is to describe the target tourist audience. Number 8, describe how you will promote your event activity facility to attract tourists. Number 9, are you applying for lodging tax funds from another community?
Would
Number
that be
10,
like Pierce County or something?
yeah, Pierce County has a lodging tax fund. I don't know if anyone locally applies for that or not. I don't think I've ever seen anyone answer this question saying that they have applied for it, but
Right.
it's
I
possible.
think maybe film festival, but that's the only one I
Yeah.
can think of.
I was gonna say the film festival in 2020 had applied for it and been approved.
Oh.
Unfortunately, we didn't have a film festival, so we never got the funding, but
Yeah.
yes, they do fund events like the film festival.
See, yeah. Question 10 is asking about grants from other organizations. And then number 11, we get into the budget questions. What percentage are they asking to be funded from the lodging tax? And we also remind them to attach the budget. And then if they're not funded, what will they cut out of their program? So those are the questions that we have. I think most of those are carried over from the last application. Yeah, Seth.
Yeah, I just had a question, as we're going through this, I think about, the amounts that are awarded to different nonprofits. I know there's, the requests in there for, how many heads, are coming in from out of town. Do we have an idea, and maybe I'm asking the committee this, but based off of I don't know what this formula looks like, but it's basically how many people they think that are coming in, that estimate, and then what they get in grant money and how much that comes out to basically per person. Because I know we do 50 cents, it's per stay for the lodging tax that comes in for this funding. But I'm just curious with a nonprofit, are they getting $15,000, but what are they actually bringing in? So just curious. Anybody have an answer?
Just in response to your question, since we don't really have like a scoring chart or anything for the applications, in the past, I've done these charts that kind of drill into that so that I get a sense of cost per person for the grant ask. And it has ranged, quite a bit, from $6 a person to 67 cents. So,
Yeah, I actually do that as well when I'm going through the applications.
I want to maybe caution too, a lot of the times, and this is kind of why we have data sources too. We can see something like, say this event is going to have 7,000 people attend or 6,000 people attend. I saw that recently with the PennMet Bike Bash, where the anticipated attendance was in the thousands, and we probably saw around 400 people. So I think maybe those metrics are important to look at as well, especially when we have historical data. There are a lot of events that do bring in a huge amount of people. Some of the newer, less proven ones may not be as reliable with that data and that estimate. And that might be just something to consider as well. And I'm going to have to take off right now to put together that booth in the rain, but just something to consider as well when you're looking at that cost per visitor. What's estimated versus what's actual is probably something that we should also consider in the long run.
Yeah, that's an important point. Yeah. Thanks, Laura.
There's always going to be a certain amount of subjectivity into what gets awarded to these because, well, I mean, that's kind of the point behind the committee is we've assembled a team of experts to give their recommendation on this rather than the state creating a formula that says if you've got this many people, then you get this much money. So yeah, I think we have the same conversation with the Arts Commission with their grants. It's do we develop a metric for those, like an actual grading scale or a way to allocate how we're going to award funds? What I've always recommended is that we leave it up to you as individual commissioners, committee members, because it's really you're appointed to your role in this committee because you have been identified as having the expertise to make that recommendation. So I kind of steer them away from having some kind of a formal scoring system, except for, if you individually benefit from having that, that's great. But I don't think it's the best idea to have the committee as a whole be beholden to a scoring system. That's kind of been my platform in the past.
Well, I mean, I think that the way this is built, we have three potentially quite different types of funding. So, it ranges from event funding to operations funding to capital projects funding. And each of those can be quite different in terms of what makes an event work dollars and cents wise versus what makes a tourism facility work or a capital project work. So if we're not going to have a scoring or evaluation sheet that is common amongst all of us, then we have to keep that in mind when we're looking at these grant applications, because they are quite different. I mean, you can have a capital project that's a $5 million capital project, and is $5,000 from the lodging tax fund going to make that big of a dent in that capital project? Maybe not. Same with operations, but yet $5,000 for an event can make the event happen. So I think it's a little bit of an interesting tightrope to walk with all three grouped together. And I just mentioned this because I do a lot of grant applications, and everybody does it a little differently. And Pierce County, for example, with their heritage grants, they do like what they call sort of the project grants, which could be archival or whatever, and those are maybe 10 to 15,000. Anything that's a capital project or a historic preservation project can go up to $30,000, and they make that distinction so that when you're looking at them or applying for them, that you have an understanding of what you're actually applying for and what's realistic in terms of your ask. So I just put that out there. Yeah.
I think that was a long roundabout way to answer Seth's question from earlier, but
That's good. Thank you.
So yeah, just going back to the questions on the application, do any of you have ideas for questions that we should ask or something that you'd want to see answered that maybe isn't answered in here? I think we've used this format for a couple of years, so maybe we fine tuned it to the point where we're getting the information you need, but
Josh,
any ideas?
I'm not seeing this question on there, but I know this came up in past years. What specifically will you spend lodging tax dollars on? Was something that was not in some of the previous applications that some people added and some people didn't. But asking that specific question, I think could be very helpful.
Okay, yeah, let me think about that one and see if there's a way to word that and get that in there.
Okay. I had one other comment on the certification.
Oh, yes.
Let's see. I'm trying, oh, okay. Personally, I am hesitant to certify that I am going to guarantee you a rise in tourism as a result of my event. So I think that in that first line where it says I am proposing a tourism related service for 2023 and can provide evidence and reporting to support a rise in tourism for the greater Gig Harbor area. Maybe something along the lines that softens that says, you know, my expectation is to to support a estimated rise or a intended rise in tourism, because, you know, here again, if you expect 1,000 people to show up, but only 400 do, it doesn't mean that you have caused a rise in tourism. So I think the intention of this is to increase tourism, but if it doesn't happen, the applicant should not be held accountable. I mean, we're all held accountable ultimately in the end, right? So.
Yeah, that's, I think I can wordsmith that, because that's probably appropriate too. So the only legal obligation we have is that if someone applies and says we expect to get this many people and we award them money, then we have a grant agreement that says you're going to hold the event and we're going to give you money after your report. That report can say, you know, we had no one attend and we had zero impact on tourism, but they still fulfilled their grant. So
yeah,
I mean, technically, if that happens, we're still going to give them their money, and we probably won't support them again in the future. But yeah, there isn't an obligation that they have to meet their quota of tourists coming in. So I think that's probably worth changing on there. All right, application instructions. Tried to make these concise based on what we've done in the past years, but I don't know, did anything stand out on the instructions to any of you if you had time to read them?
Yeah, just annoying stuff here, sorry. There is a typo in what can be funded with lodging tax revenue on the third bullet. Operation of a tourism related facility owned or operated should be by a
Oh,
nonprofit. Yeah.
Is that fixed? Yep, we're going to continue to stress that if people are filling out the application, that they should reach out to me, and you know, if they have questions or need advice or want to have it double checked or vetted before it gets submitted, we're going to keep encouraging that like we did last year. And the last section is just the section on the reporting that they'll be required to do with their grant. So yeah, any other comments, questions about the application? The timeline then I think is going to be to try to get this out probably in the next week or two, get it posted and get it noticed and start blasting all our communications channels, letting people know it's out there, keep it open until August. And then when we have our September meeting, that will probably be a longer meeting. We'll try to schedule all the applicants, depending on how many we have, and see how that process shakes out.
You said September?
we'll plan to do that in September so we can have a recommendation for council to discuss in October.
Josh, is it, is it my understanding that the city went to a biennial budget?
We are,
So
yes,
is-
we are.
So is this like an interim recommendation based on revenue from the lodging tax sources that have come in?
Yeah, so the city's budget, when we're talking about lodging tax for the official biennial city budget, that is just the only thing that's in the city's budget is a fund balance. So we're going to adopt a budget that says the lodging tax fund balance is, well, I think right now it's like 1.3 million. So that's really all it says.
Okay.
We have discussions with council about how we're going to use that money, and council will give us some kind of direction on what they're pre-approving that money to be used for, but that's not part of the official 2-year budget. So that official budget document is very high level, and it's just saying that the money is there, basically. The money is there and it can be spent. So we're going to say we have the 1.3 million that we have, and then that number will be adjusted by whatever revenues we're anticipating are going to come in during that 2023-2024 biennium. So that part, you don't really need to worry about the biennium part too much. Each year we'll adopt a new resolution, and the resolution is where council says this group gets this much money. And that'll be the official awarding of the money. So that will happen yearly still. But this year it'll be part of the budget process. So probably the same meeting where we adopt the budget, we'll also pass a resolution that says these are the groups and this is the money. And then we'll do it again probably next December.
Okay. Do you think that, you know how last year we had like 3 different applications for 3 different events from a single entity? Are we going to encourage that again, or would we have applicants apply for a certain category? So if you're going to do 3 events and all your stuff is events, you do 1 application. If you're going to do a capital project, it's something else. Or a different application, so that maybe there's categories or something. I got a little confusing last year. That's all I'm saying, is if we're accepting multiple applications from single organizations, or if we want them to apply in one.
Yeah, the way that I would anticipate this happening is, I think we can do it either way depending on how the organization wants to do it. So if the organization has and I think it would just be based on what their budget structure looks like. So if they have a single budget and they have several events that are all included in that one budget, it may make sense for them just to turn in 1 application and say, here's our application, here's our full budget, here's what we're doing, it's all listed in the budget, here's the LTAC money, it's all listed in that budget. Some organizations, I'm thinking of maybe the Community Paddlers Club might have separate budgets for each one of their events, and maybe that would be a little bit easier for them to submit 2 different applications. I think that's something I'd probably have to address with each applicant, and hopefully they reach out to me and just clarify that.
So then, just as an example, if the city is going to apply for funding, but the Ltch Foundation wants to advocate for a roof for the Ltch, that would go into the city's application.
Yes, yeah. It would have to be the city that applies for that, because the Ltch can't apply for capital projects.
Right.
Yeah. And the city, I'm pretty sure, will just do 1 giant application for all of the money they ask for. That's what we've done in past years.
Then we would definitely need to see a budget.
Yeah, yeah.
All
All right.
Any other questions before we move on? All right, so we'll go to new business items. So this group has been meeting monthly. Josh, do you want to cover this, or you want me to just go ahead?
Oh, you can go ahead. You can take this one.
All right, so how this is a monthly meeting. I think the suggestion is to move to quarterly. I think that fits better with our application process, really what we're reviewing, and discussing in these meetings. And so just want to hear some feedback on that, and people in agreement.
think we used to be quarterly up until about a year or two ago, if I remember right.
We were, yeah, we were always quarterly. I think, I will tell you though, it's been only the last 5 years maybe that we've had the application process. So before we were pretty much, you know, people, we approved people giving, you know, different municipalities money, but we had no application process like this where we spend hours, hours interviewing. And so I think that was, you know, part of why we went to the monthly. But I think we can certainly do it quarterly now that we really have no input. We used to have input on marketing and what Lorraine was doing, what you know, Laura would be doing and kind of directing some of that. And so obviously we've gone to strictly pretty much applications, right? Is what we're doing. Josh, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
just to kind of touch on that, I mean, Laura's still going to be reporting to you. She did kind of a quick report today because she had to get done at the
Yeah.
farmer's market, but she's
Yeah.
going to be reporting to you on what's happening and getting your input and feedback on it. Yeah.
But not necessarily during the meetings. I mean, it sounds like really we are advisory on applications and funding.
That's your official main role, yes, but you're
Yeah.
definitely a valuable advisory. You're definitely provide valuable advice and guidance to her on what she's doing as well, but it's not your
Right, but
official role.
I'm just saying that was a lot of our time was spent on that
Yeah.
before. And then when the applications came in, it was like, oh my gosh, these are, you know, we have hours, those of us, you know, not that we want to be doing that. So if we can get the applications ahead of time, right, you guys shake your head beforehand, like 2 or 3 weeks, so, you know, so before a meeting, I think we'll come better prepared. And we can certainly do that quarterly. So that's my opinion, just throwing it out there. Okay.
I like the review of the big data, but it's probably excessive on a monthly basis. So, you know, if we are touching on that stuff from a quarterly perspective, I think that's probably more digestible and easier for us to understand the impact.
Great. Okay, I saw a lot of heads going up and down. So, all right, great.
We're thinking doing quarterly meetings in, what would it be? We're doing one in June and then one in September and then again in December. So
I mean, it might make
March, June, September, December, I think, if I'm reading that correctly.
during that application period and us approving grants, it may make sense for us to have a more common cadence. But I think as we transition out of that, it's easy for us to probably handle it quarterly. But that period between August and September, that would, I think, get a little tricky for meeting every 3 months.
Yeah, and I definitely anticipate having special meetings in September to get the grants approved. So yeah, not expecting that we'll just do that all in an hour or two in one meeting.
Sue, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. I have a 1 o'clock meeting, so I'm going to excuse myself, but thank you. Good to see everybody. Talk soon.
Thanks, Sue. All right, I think we're good there, so we can move on to committee member reports, comments. Anybody have anything exciting to share? All right.
Yes, Sam.
Oh, yes.
I've got some, oh, sorry, me and Stephanie are just ready to go. I just want to share with everybody that Harbor Wild Watch has a brand new exhibit. It's running now through the end of August. It's a special traveling exhibit on orca called Orca Shared Waters, Shared Home. And it's beautiful in the Scansey House. We're going to be sending out more information about it. It just opened up on Saturday, so it's brand new. But I'm going to drop by all the hotels with a little packet of information so that you can send people down there, have it for a limited time, and then it's off to another facility. So please send your people.
Cool. Yeah. For those of you that don't know, History Rocks is happening on August 20th here at the museum. And so that'll be a big fun one. We also have a new exhibit that'll open in November. Well, the PAL Arts Open Juried Show will open in September. We have Little Boats on through the end of October. And then we have a special Edward Curtis exhibit coming in November. So that'll be fun. Thanks to Lodging Tax. Yeah.
I think the exciting news for the film festival is that it's actually going to happen this year. So
Yeah.
the last weekend in September. So
And I think I've got lodging rack cards for almost everybody, but we just had a new rack built for the museum, so visitors can pick up information. So if you have any rack cards or anything that you want to drop off, we're happy to display those. Also, the ones over at the Donkey Creek Park on the restroom building, that rack is almost empty. So if you have cards or rack cards that you want to put over there, I would suggest that. It looks sad and empty, so. And a lot of people probably would pull stuff from there, so.
Josh, is that something that the city helps with as well? I mean, it almost seems easier if everything went to the city and they put them out rather than everybody, you know, I don't know, it's rather than having everybody from, you know, every cause taking things there. That might help or organize it, you know, a bit.
I would think that's a city one. I don't know who owns that for sure.
Yeah, we actually are trying to get all the rat cards, and also I did want to bring up, because I think I emailed a couple of you guys. Last meeting we talked about doing a big order for rat cards to save money for everybody, and it does seem to be somewhat discounted if we do a larger order of multiple designs. So if you have rat cards you're wanting, we're going to be putting in an order here, hopefully in the next month or so. So if we get that, and then we can definitely check those periodically. And if you do see that, give me a shout, and I can run down there, because we've got a ton of your guys' rat cards here on site. Jenny, real quick, are you guys doing the 24-hour film competition, or what was?
No, I think the film festival is cut back to just only doing the festival itself.
Okay.
There's not plans to do the 72 hours, what it was.
Okay. It was a potential draft on our event calendars. That's why I just wanted to clarify that.
Hey, Jenica, is there a chance that you could send the dimensions for the rack cards that you'd be printing? Because sometimes they're slightly different depending on which company.
Yeah, so in my experience, industry standard is 4x9, and that's what we use is 4x9.
Okay.
So
I've just found that there's been times when you order them and one company prints them at one size and another one prints them at
yeah,
so.
I design all ours 4x9 because that fits in pretty much all rat card cases.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. Well, then we can move to somebody can move us to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Jenny, I hope to see you down at Farmers Market. I'm going to go down and try to brave it for a little bit. Get my
And my daughter and I are always there from 4 to 7. So hopefully I'll see you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm be there probably right around 4 after I get the kids. So awesome.
All right. See ya.
Everybody.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, folks.